Hello and welcome to the FI Newscast, where we bring you relevant news in the food and beverage industry. I'm Susan Choi, and I thank you for watching. Today is Friday, July 7th, 2023. We have a great show for you today. Our special guest is Alison Bodor, President and CEO of the American Frozen Food Institute. It'll be a great conversation detailing insights in the frozen food sector. But first, let's cover some of the top stories from this week so far. In corporate news, a lot of activity. First off, Subway is making significant headway in international deals. The sandwich giant just signed its 15th new international master franchise agreement in the country of Georgia. This adds to new signings in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. Subway will now add a total of 9,000 stores overseas. All this amidst Subway's impending sale, the list of buyers has been narrowed down to several private equity firms. Meanwhile, candy maker Mars has announced it will buy Kevin's Natural Foods, a business known for its sous vide meals, sauces, and side dishes. The sale values the company at $800 million, but sadder news for the famed plant-based foods maker, the Tattooed Chef. The business has announced plans to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The news comes after they failed to raise more cash, as well as having to deal with the struggles of the current economy. The Tattooed Chef joins two other companies that have since collapsed, UK-based The Meatless Farm and Canada-based The Very Good Food Company. Some interesting happenings going on in manufacturing. Tyson has announced that their products are no longer going to be antibiotic-free. The poultry giant is reintroducing certain drugs into the animals' diets, which are known to prevent illness and which are not important to treating human health. This breaks a several years long pledge by Tyson to forego antibiotic usage in its meat. The Food and Drug Administration does encourage limited use of antibiotics in meat products, but experts have argued that greater usage of antibiotics can quicken the evolution of medicine-resistant bacteria. Meanwhile, a recent study by Danone North America found that 60% of Americans surveyed said they do not eat a nutritious diet because of physical and economic barriers. The study also discovered that diet-related diseases cause 1 million preventable deaths annually. Some tensions in the jobs front as a big strike has bloomed in Los Angeles. More than 15,000 hotel food service employees left work this past weekend to demand higher wages. From front-of-the-house employees to line cooks and dishwashers, the protesters timed their walkout to coincide with the holiday weekend rush. Unite Here Local 11 is the union representing the workers. They are proposing a wage rise of $19 an hour for the next 3 years in order to help catch up with LA's rising cost of living. And the most recent ADP employment report seemed to support their arguments. While the month of June saw more job creation, pay growth continues to be at a slow rate for both those who change jobs and those who stay in their jobs. Over in social media, an undeniable retail takeover by TikTok. TikTok Shop is a massively popular live stream marketplace that is looking to hit $20 billion in gross merchandise value by the end of this year, potentially giving Amazon a run for its money. Online consumers work with sellers through a live feed via TikTok, looking at live coverage of items to buy. The new feature is the fastest growing asset on TikTok and has a quickly growing base in Southeast Asia. This news comes as TikTok still faces a potential ban in the US over national security concerns. And finally, a new product from PepsiCo that's sure to turn some heads. The soda maker has just released Cola Chup, a new condiment which infuses Pepsi flavoring with a blend of smoked tomatoes, spices, oregano, and ketchup. The company received help from the consulting leg of the Culinary Institute of America on this one and was released on the 4th of July in select baseball stadiums. But how did it taste? That's what we at the Food Institute are curious about. If you were one of the lucky few to try it on your hot dog, let us know your thoughts. Submit it to www.foodinstitute.com. And those are your top stories. We're going to turn now to our special guest. She is the president and CEO of the American Frozen Food Institute, a member-driven national trade association that advances the interests of all segments of the $50 billion frozen food and beverage industry. She is leading efforts to deliver on AFI's strategic plan to advance food safety, advocate for frozen, increase consumption, and grow resources. Her mission is to ensure that frozen foods and beverages are proudly chosen to meet the needs of a changing world. Her name is Alison Bodor. Alison, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Susan. Thanks for having me.
All right, I got to ask you before we start, cola chup, would you try it?
Absolutely. Although I have to say I'm a big fan of ketchup. I am a devotee of ketchup and eat a lot of it, especially on my French fries. So we'll have to see how it tastes on French fries.
I agree with you there. I am also a big fan of ketchup. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe it might unseat ketchup from its throne.
Maybe.
Anyway, yeah. Well, thanks so much again for joining us, Alison. Let's get right into it. First off, these are economic trends that many have been struggling through, consumer and business alike. What have you been seeing within the frozen food industry from where you stand?
Right. So inflation has been an issue across the food industry. We've seen price increases over the last year and a half, and that's hit frozen as well. It's no different. Some of the price drivers has included labor and also fuel. And fortunately, we're starting to see those trends, those prices moderate, and I'm expecting we'll see the price increases also moderate. One impact of inflation is for consumers is that they're probably choosing to eat at home more. And so in terms of retail frozen, that's probably an opportunity for the category. In general, I would say in terms of pricing as well, private brands and national brands are both quite strong in the frozen aisle, and it's probably an opportunity on the private brand side yet, and they are growing in frozen, although national brands still dominate the aisle.
It's interesting to hear. What about, considering, not just price, but how consumers are considering health consciousness more, their needs and health? What are the truths and myths regarding the frozen food industry, and what is the frozen food industry doing to educate the consumer, and where are we on that?
Right. So first of all, it's important to note that frozen is a temperature state, and frozen foods are just as nutritious as their fresh counterparts. And this is especially true with frozen produce. Frozen or produce that is grown for the frozen industry is harvested and then frozen within hours of harvest. So it locks in those nutrients and they stay in the product for as long as the shelf life exists. So you really have the option here with frozen of eating the same nutrition as fresh, but you can eat it year round. With fresh, sometimes the nutrient content can degrade over time because they can be picked and then it might be weeks before they get to shelf at retail. So that's certainly an upfront myth to correct. At the same time, I think we do have some opportunities to communicate to the consumer. One area is around the process of freezing, the technology of freezing, and the other is around the products that are on the shelf today. So when we talk about the technology of freezing, first of all, the way we preserve frozen foods is through temperature. It's about the most natural form of preservation that exists, and it's been around for a very long time. Today, we have new technologies to freeze foods called individual quick freezing. You might have heard that term IQF. And what that means is that foods are very quickly blast frozen. And in the speed of that freezing process prevents the formation of large crystals in food. And what that does is it helps protect the integrity of the cell wall of the food so that foods maintain their shape better when they're thawed or cooked. So that's pretty, I think, fun to talk about and interesting for the consumer to know that freezing is just that. It's a temperature state. There aren't extra additives added to foods to help them freeze. It's just frozen. It's a temperature state.
What about in terms of the environment? That's another issue that consumers are increasingly concerned about. How does frozen food fit into the context of issues like climate change? You did mention food waste. Where is the industry in terms of that?
Right. We have a good story to tell there also, Susan. We know that 40% of food waste occurs in the home. So we have an opportunity to use frozen foods to help reduce the level of food waste in the home. Cornell University just did a literature review of the published data on food waste, and they found that less frozen food is discarded versus fresh in both homes and at retail. So we know that and we also know that consumers appreciate that value in frozen. In this environment of inflation, nobody can afford to waste food, right? And 77% of consumers say that to us in a survey. They can't afford to waste food. And that number goes up to 85% if you talk about SNAP eligible consumers, or those consumers who are using food stamps, who are even more conscious of food loss and the ability to preserve every dollar that they buy in food. So we have a nice opportunity, I think, to lean in on food waste as an industry, as a means to help consumers reduce food waste, which means reduced food in landfill, and that is a big source of greenhouse gas emissions, and also to help consumers save money in this inflationary environment. This is one way to help them extend their food dollar.
What about in terms of government policy? What's coming down the pike in Capitol Hill that would impact the frozen food industry?
Right now, one of the big issues on the Hill that's being debated, discussed, negotiated is called the Farm Bill. And that's a bill that reauthorizes funding for federal feeding programs as well as risk management tools for farmers. About 80% of that bill is actually federal feeding program dollars. And we have a bill that we're supporting called the SHOP Act, and it stands for Supporting All Healthy Produce Options When Purchasing Produce. And that act is important because it starts to put frozen in the context and the benefits that it offers to consumers, particularly low-income consumers. So that program encourages USDA to include more frozen produce in nutrition incentive programs. Today, most of those dollars go toward fresh produce. And fresh produce is great. We all consume most forms of produce in our busy lives, depending on what the application is, what we're making, or what the day looks like. And we should be offering low-income consumers those same options, those same choices to meet the needs of their families with all forms of produce. And that's what the SHOP Act does. It really asks USDA to prioritize frozen, to give consumers the option to take advantage of the benefits of frozen in their homes and in their lives. We're very excited about the SHOP Act and welcome any other support from others in the industry that agree with keeping frozen produce front and center and really leveling the options for low-income consumers so that they can have access to these foods. That one of the beauties of frozen foods, and particularly frozen produce, is that they're available year-round and in every community.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us, Alison. All right, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but when we come back, we'll have more from Alison Bodor of the American Frozen Food Institute. Stay with us. All right, we are back with Alison Bodor of the American Frozen Food Institute. Alison, I want to talk to you again about fresh versus frozen. You were pointing out earlier in our conversation about the many benefits of frozen food, myths and truths. But what do you think still needs to be done to further educate the consumer? We're still seeing in surveys and studies that people just seem to involuntarily associate produce, fresh produce with the healthier option over its frozen counterpart. But Alison, what do you think needs to be done to dispel that myth? What efforts still need to be taken to put the truth out there?
One point, I think it's important for us to communicate the partnership between fresh and frozen. And in today's environment where we've got a produce consumption crisis, really only 1 in 10 Americans is eating the recommended number of servings of fruits and vegetables. The goal should be to eat more. So as much as we can talk about more produce and not make it fresh versus frozen, that is a win for the consumer as well as for the industry. We need to talk about affordability of frozen as well as that's an advantage in this climate that matters to consumers. And that affordability plays out in a couple of ways, not just by reducing food waste and helping extend that food dollar, which I mentioned earlier, but also in terms of time and helping busy consumers spend more time together with their families around the dinner table instead of in the kitchen, preparing, cleaning, chopping foods and getting ready for dinner. So I think we have a few key opportunities to talk more about the positives here in frozen. And also in terms of not making it fresh versus frozen so much, how do we use both of them together? And we know that the core consumer of frozen, the busy millennial, does just that. So maybe it's a frozen pizza with vegetables, with fresh vegetables added on the top, right? Or it's an Asian chicken salad with chicken nuggets on the salad. That's how consumers are really using frozen foods in their lives. And so normalizing that behavior, helping to share tips and practices about how consumers can really do that, I think is a big opportunity for us in the industry.
Alison, what about meat? What about the meat sector? What is the frozen food industry doing to strategize in appealing to more consumers?
I love that question, Susan, because often when we think about frozen, we automatically go to entrees or fruits and vegetables or ice cream. And yet the frozen proteins are a really important part of the category also. One way that has been really interesting, and I've noticed it more since the pandemic, is the meat industry and the seafood industry especially is taking advantage of individual piece packaging. And that's really made the category more approachable. I don't know about you, but during the pandemic, I made a commitment to try and learn how to cook more seafood. And I know others did too. And those individually packaged fillets made that very approachable. It made it more convenient for me to try new recipes and new cuts of fish or new types of fish other than shrimp and salmon, which I use a lot of. So I think that's been really helpful in the frozen aisle, is to offer those options. Some of them are pre-marinated or pre-seasoned, or they're on a plank. That's just been a real convenience to the busy consumer and makes cooking proteins easier.
Right. And what about the B2B side? How does frozen food benefit, back at the house and in restaurants and other forms of food service?
I like the question because in my membership, in the API membership, very many of my members sell not only into retail for consumers, but they do also sell into food service. And food service was greatly impacted, as you know, during the pandemic. So frozen's been a very reliable tool, if you will, for food service operations to get back into the game post-pandemic. They've dealt with the same pressures on inflation and labor. And frozen comes in there for the win by pre-preparing some of these foods that are otherwise very labor intensive. And frozen can offer those options very consistently. So a food service operator knows they can rely on these pre-made frozen appetizers, for example, or soups, and the consumer is going to get the same product again and again that they enjoy. You're also getting the consistency. If that's pre-prepared vegetables, for example, maybe it's chopped onions, but that's a huge benefit to the food service operator rather than paying an employee behind the kitchen to chop those vegetables. It's safer and it's convenient. Another benefit of frozen that Frozen's been able to help restaurants as they get back in business is around menu flexibility. Because with frozen options, all of a sudden the restaurateur can offer more options on their menu without the fear of those options going to waste if they don't serve as many of them, in a single evening. And then it goes without saying that frozen helps food waste back at the house too, in the kitchen, by allowing chefs and food service operators to use what they need that night and put the rest away, knowing that they can use it tomorrow or later in the week. So frozen has definitely been a tool to help food service operators regain traction in this new environment. And hopefully that stays. I know inflation is trying, especially in the food service industry. It's creating a difficult environment, but hopefully frozen is there as a partner to help.
Right. And final question for you, Alison. What is the biggest goal for the frozen food industry over the next year?
Really, it's the Farm Bill and the SHOP Act that I mentioned, leaning into the benefits of frozen, talking to consumers and policymakers about the role of frozen in delivering access to convenient nutrition at an affordable price, and making sure that when we think about price, we're thinking about reduced food waste, as well as allowing shoppers more time around the dinner table instead of in the kitchen. And I certainly finally hope that consumers explore the frozen aisle and see all of the very fun, exciting foods that are available there today. It is a new aisle, and there is something there for everyone.
All right, Alison Bodor, President and CEO of the American Frozen Food Institute. Alison, thanks again for your time. It was really great.
Thank you, Susan.
Before we go, we're going to take a look at what's coming up in the food industry in the coming days. On Tuesday, July 11th and Wednesday, July 12th, mark your calendars for Amazon Prime Day. On Thursday, July 13th, PepsiCo will be announcing its second quarter earnings for fiscal year 2023. And ConAgra Brands will also be announcing its earnings on Thursday, July 13th as well for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2023. And that's our show. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Susan Choi, and I want to let you know that we will have another great show for you next Friday, July 14th. Our guest will be Jonathan Deutsch, Professor of Food and Hospitality Management and Head of Drexel Food Lab at Drexel University. It's going to be a great chat. I also want to remind you to show us some love on social media. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channels. The support really makes a difference for us. Thanks again for watching. Have a great weekend and take care.